you mentioned about your own like personal development journey. Now that you've been in this world, let's say for a little while, if someone was looking to get started in their own personal development journey, is there any books or courses that you would recommend would be a good starting point? Welcome everyone to the main journey, a way for you to join me on a learning journey through life. My name is Samuel Main, and today we welcome Matt Davies to the show. We first met through a coaching program a couple of years ago. Since then, Matt has gone on to become a prolific life coach, empowering people to create powerful and fulfilling futures for themselves by connecting to their inner personal power. Matt helps people to reclaim the power they forgot they had, make decisions to create the future they want, and to take action in the present and not put off for someday in the future. Welcome, Matt. Super grateful that you are here, buddy.
It's great to be here, man. I really appreciate having the privilege of spending some time with you. That's
it's been too long,
great, man. Yeah,
been too long. So, dude, I would love to kick this off with a little bit of a further insight into how you help people.
Sure. Well, I appreciate the intro, and it's kind of a lot of words in there and a lot of stuff. But ultimately, when I reflect back and kind of how I help people, it's often kind of looking back at, well, how was I maybe 5-10 years ago? And what were some of the challenges that I faced, and how does that translate into how I now help people? And if you're happy, I'll tell a little bit about my story and my journey, because that kind of gives some context to what I do. And I actually worked for Apple for about 6 years, just under 6 years.
Could see that.
And it was great working there. It was an incredible company to work for, and I had a really great job with what I was doing. I was doing a lot of training. I trained customers on how to use stuff. I did software, hardware, tech kind of training, but then I also went into training people who were coming into the business and getting them on board ready to work within the business. So always kind of in a training and facilitating position. And it got to a point where I was like, I felt like there wasn't the future there for me, yet I felt very trapped. And it's interesting because I was in a great job, I enjoyed it, yet I still felt trapped. And the funny thing was that it was like I had these proverbial blinkers on, and it was almost like there was only one way forward. And I'd like to say at that point, I felt like there wasn't another route apart from maybe to progress through the business. But really, it was a fear that I had. And it was a fear of, well, what would happen if I took a step out and did maybe what I really wanted to do? And I always knew I wanted to run my own business. My dad ran his own business, and I always thought I'd love to do that. I didn't really know what that was going to be. But there was a switch that happened, and the switch was taking the decision-making power that every one of us has and exercising it, despite everything that comes up with that. And it's really interesting, because the more I help people and the more I work with people, the more I realize that we externalize our power, as in what we're able to influence and make decisions about. We externalize it to things outside of ourselves. And really what I do, and in answer to your question, how do I help people? You know, what specifically I do? I help people stop externalizing, you know, the reasons why they can't do stuff. Because we all do this process, and I'll explain externalizing a little bit more maybe in a moment, but it's this idea that, well, I can't because of X outside of me, or I can't because of this situation or circumstance. And that feels very limiting, at least in my experience it did. It felt really limiting. So how I help people is stop putting stuff outside of themselves and start bringing it back into their zone of influence and their sphere of, you know, decision-making power, which when you do that, even if it's small things, it starts to create this momentum, or at least this sense of ownership that I can actually do something in this situation, which it sounds like maybe quite a niche nuance, but in my experience, it's so powerful when people start to do that, because you can actually create a life that you want, as opposed to, you know, maybe having the belief that life just happens to me and I have to figure out how I navigate that. So yeah, that's in a roundabout way an answer to the question.
That's considerably better than the intro.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Great stuff. What came to mind for me was being, and I've just been talking to a close friend about this, is being uncomfortably comfortable. It sounds like you're in that place. How did you muster the courage then to actually make a change?
Well, it's interesting. I think sometimes we have to take stock of what's going on and what's important to us. And for me, that came in the form of my partner at the time having a job change, or the opportunity to change jobs. And it kind of came about, and we've been discussing it and we were talking about it. And I was like, I could look to move to a different location with the business I was working for. And I was like, well, maybe it's an opportunity for me to try something new, something that I'm a bit more passionate about. And at that stage, I mean, I've always been into health and fitness. I played sports at school. I did a PT qualification when I was 18. I hadn't really utilized it. It was more for my own learning and knowledge. And I was like, well, why don't I give this thing a go? And anyway, talked to a few contacts that I had, and ended up getting a job at the David Lloyd Club, and worked there as a kind of I guess a mid-level manager for about 9-10 months. And it was really a case of me making a decision and being a bit more conscious about what is it that I want, which, as you and I both know, that's a hard question to sometimes answer. Like, what do I actually want? Sometimes we're very clear about what we don't want, but when it comes to defining and clarifying, well, what is it that I do want? Often a load of self-judgment can come when you start to try and answer it. You think, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't think that because that could mean that I'm like this or whatever. And actually stripping all that back and just be like, what is it that I want right now? And not having to think about how that's going to play out 10 years down the line, which is what I used to do. I'd be like, well, if I did that, then that might mean this, and almost try and figure out all the future rather than actually just thinking about, well, what is it that I can do right now? And so I just I kind of got clear, made some movements, and that led me to work 10 months for this business, David Lloyd's. And then I ended up making the decision to, like, actually, I'm going to do something myself. And I started very slowly. It felt like a very much a crawling forward process in starting my own business. I got help, which is where we met on a course where it was helping me learn and understand how to run business. And that was really my journey into understanding actually what it was to run my own business, and realizing that it's okay if I don't know everything. There's an opportunity to learn from others who are that step ahead. So
it's really interesting to hear your journey of going into the David Lloyd, and then also still having that awareness to be like, oh, actually, this still isn't what I want it to be. I love that you brought up that question, is what is it I want? Because I've personally been sitting with that for a little while and really reflecting. It's one of the most difficult questions to answer for me anyway. It's been a real challenge. So I love that you mentioned like some of the difficulties, and what comes up from that question. So you finished at David Lloyd, you started your own company. I believe it's called 𝗥𝗲𝗿. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's a local group training business.
Yeah.
And 𝗥𝗲𝗿 is what it's called. It's based in where I live, a place called Wixham's in Bedfordshire. And it's a kind of a new development, and there wasn't any offering for that type of thing. So I was doing a bit of PT, one-to-one coaching. And then, I started the group training business really so that I could claim back a bit of time rather than going all sorts of weird and wonderful times of the day, and actually make some money that meant that I could
pay the bill,
have some fruits from my labor, as it were. So yeah,
I like it. So if anyone who's listening is thinking about making a change, or they've had that reflection to be like, hey, I'm not okay with the path that I'm on, what action, what steps would you recommend them taking to be able to make some progress or make some changes?
That's a great question, and it's simpler than I think a lot of people might think. My response is speak to someone about it. Because if you've not told anyone about it, it's just an idea in your head. But as soon as you verbalize to someone else, a real person, not just your dog, or speak to the wall, but no, generally just talk to someone about it. Because as soon as you verbalize something that's within you, you are literally birthing life into that thing and that idea. And it's not that means that everything's going to happen, but it's a first step. And if that's the question, you know, what's the first thing or what's the action step? Well, it's tell someone. And if you've told someone, write down, like that could be another action that you could do. Like write down what is it that you think you might want to do. And a caveat with that is I would, as best as you can, and sometimes it's difficult, remove as much kind of I want to say analysis of whether it's right or wrong as possible, and really deep in that is self-judgment. But
yeah,
don't overanalyze what it is that you write down or what your idea is. You might think, oh yeah, but it won't work because of. Try and remove and strip back as much of the why won't it work as possible, and just write down your ideas. I personally have gone through a massive journey of like realizing how much negative chatter within my own head around ideas and thoughts I have. I'm still on that journey. I'm not saying that that's disappeared, but the more that I remove that kind of the daggers towards myself, right? Oh, well, I couldn't do that because I'm like this, or I can like just try and strip away as much of that as possible and write down and verbalize what is it that your ideas are. Ideally with someone who you believe might be supportive of you. You might be surprised. Some people who you think might be supportive might be like, that's a rubbish idea. Don't let that phase you though, because there's hundreds, if not thousands of examples of people around the world who's probably already done what you've done, or what you want to do. Sorry, I should say.
Yeah, it's really interesting because my first thought was I've had ideas and I've shared them and they've been shot down by people right away. And then it's instantly changed my own perspective of that amazing idea. Like the fire gets put out a little bit. So it's really interesting to hear that your go-to is to speak to someone. But I think I interpret that differently. I think I would ask myself a lot of questions first on that idea. But I'm now looking at it as like, okay, maybe has that been the wrong approach? Maybe I need to action those ideas sooner and quicker.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I'd maybe respond to that and saying there's not right or wrong. And you know, you've asked me from my perspective on what will be an action.
Yeah.
And the beauty of it is your response, if someone asks you that question, would be completely different. And that's cool. Like there isn't, sometimes we get caught up in this kind of, is that right? Is that the right way to do it? I'm an absolute sucker for it. So I was like, oh, but maybe they know because they've done it. And so they've got the right answer. Interestingly, and coming back to the first question you asked, that is an externalization.
Yes.
In and of itself, because you're looking outside of yourself for whether it's right or wrong. And so when we think about, well, is this right or is this wrong? I mean, again, it doesn't matter, like, in my opinion. Like, is that something you want to do?
Does that come back to then those fears that you have? So
I believe so.
Everything from a place of, okay, what we should action, what ideas we should further develop, it's all actually linked to you overcoming those personal fears that you have, whether that's fear of failure, fear of uncertainty, fear of ridicule from others, fear of success. It all stems back to you've still got to overcome those fears. Super interesting.
Yeah. And you know what? I love this question and talking about this actually, because I think there's two things. There's the fear and the overcoming of it. But there's also the trust within yourself, which is a different angle to look at it, because it's really this transaction of, well, I'm fearful. Let's take what other people might think. I've experienced a lot of that, and a lot of my decision-making processes have previously been like, well, what might others think of me? But sometimes we think, well, I've just got to overcome that fear. And I agree with that. I do think we need to overcome the fear and learn ways when we identify that I feel a little bit scared about this. I want to move through it or move past it. Yes. However, there's also the kind of the other side of the coin, I guess, is maybe the good way to phrase it, is that, do I trust my own judgment? Because trusting yourself, in my opinion, is actually just as powerful, because what you do is you remove the external noise. It's like, well, actually, is this something that I'm committed to? Is this something that I want to do? And if we can almost turn back to ourselves and say, well, have I got my own back here? and not have to rely on the validation of others, which a lot of us do. And that's not right or wrong to do that. But I'm just saying, if we can almost shift towards this retrusting of ourselves, there's also a significant amount of power in that.
Love that. So how does someone who's potentially does not have that self-belief, how does someone overcome self-doubt and actually start to believe in themselves?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there's some nuances with this person to person. Within the work I do, I often help people identify what I would call contexts for life. And this is where, within a one-to-one setting, when I'm doing one-to-one coaching with people, we'll look to identify a context for their life. And this is often shaped by experiences from my younger life. So within a one-to-one context, within a one-to-one kind of framework, I'd probably help someone discover, well, what is it that is shaping the way that you see the world? So that's something I would do. Without having that, what would I recommend to someone? I would probably say that to start trusting yourself is to do small enough actions that are almost impossible to fail, but do stretch you a little bit. So it's almost like the 1%ers, the small thing that you can do today or do right now. Like, you could even, if you want to practice this, you could stop this podcast and go and say, right, I'm going to do 2 push-ups, and do 2 push-ups. And all you've done is you've just created effectively a new pathway of, I've had a thought, I've completed the thought by acting on it. And you just built this very small path of self-trust and belief. It's like, well, I say something and I've done it. And therefore you close the loop off. In fact, one of the guys that we both know, Rich, he used to use this example of like, don't leave these loops open, like close the loop so that it kind of brings a closure to the thing that you had an idea about. And if you start to do those things, even if they seem insignificant or small, it's a bit like going to the gym and like doing a rep on a bench press or a squat or whatever it might be. It's just a small practice of this trusting yourself, making your bed, drinking water more often, or whatever is that habit that actually could be meaningful to you. If you can just do that, and it might be a simple thing, but build small things, what you're actually doing in a wider context is building self-efficacy. You're building trust within yourself. And so that would be without going down a supported journey with someone to help you with that, coaching or something like that. It would be, do the things that you know that you can complete and acknowledge those within yourself when you do them, because that is the cycle and that's the loop closure that really is going to help you start building that self-belief and self-trust and stop you doubting your abilities. Because really where doubt is often created, in my experience with myself and working with others, is when we say something but we don't follow through. And so we start doubting whether we're able to do that thing because we haven't done it, and then we haven't done it again, and then we're like, well, can I really do this? And it's like you start to almost doubt so much because you've just not done that first thing, and it's like a cascade.
So interesting. I love that advice. I think it's applicable, I suppose, to everyone. Is just completing the promises they're making to themselves. Which is great. I've got so many questions about what you do and some of the frameworks and stuff that you use. But before we get there, so you moved into starting your own PTing business, or kind of boot camp business, if I've read that correctly. I know that you've done that for quite a fair few years as well. And then what you're doing now is another evolution of that. So talk to me about that journey from owning the essentially personal training business and then transitioning into what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. So it's been a really cool journey when I reflect. Back in 2016, I came across the world of personal coaching, or personal development, as a lot of people call it. And I was fascinated. I was like, oh, wow, like this stuff really seems to resonate with me. And that was actually at the time when I felt quite blinkered. And again, for my own learning and my own kind of development, I was like, right, I want to do a course. I want to learn more about this so I can understand, one, how it applies to me, but also, potentially use that in my work where I was doing one-to-one work with people. And so I did Tony Robbins' Core 100 program, which is like a basic intro to coaching and strategies to help people. And it was great because a load of it was like, how do you apply this to yourself first? And that's always been the way that I've worked. It's like, how do I apply what I know to myself so I can embody it and live it? And then, you know, from that place of experience, I can help others.
Okay.
And what I did was I did that course, but I hadn't really properly started my business, my fitness business. And I didn't really know if I could go straight into the coaching at the time. I guess just like, actually, I've got this qualification, this PT qualification, let's do that thing. Started doing that. And I realized that I was able to bring elements of what I knew about mindset work and even sometimes emotional work into the client change process. And I realized how powerful it was. I was like, wow, like it's the conversations outside of the training often, or outside of the nutrition coaching, that were really making the big differences. And what I realized was the more that I kind of delved into that side of things, the more that I was enjoying seeing these like changes within people that were almost completely separate from the fact that they would show up to a training session. And I was like, I really love this. And when just before the pandemic hit, I'd started to do this with a few people. I'd offered it to a few friends just as kind of practice. Like, I want to practice my skills. Would you be open to being coached?
Mm-hmm.
I helped people who loved writing but hadn't written for years start writing again. Just kind of getting my kind of skills refined a little bit.
Helping people.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was like, this is really like, this can be really impactful for people. And I knew that from my own experience, but I was like, realizing it was almost like starting to believe, like I started to believe in myself that I could help people. And I then, with some of my clients who were having some other challenges just through the natural relationship we had, I started offering standalone coaching to them and getting paid for it. And I just started building from that place. And, you know, it was slow, it was arduous. I was like, how do I tell people about this? How do I even explain it to people?
Yeah.
And that was challenging. And to a certain extent, sometimes it still can be, you know, explaining to people how I help them. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's better just to say, look, let me see if I can help you. And then you can make your own judgment. But so I started doing that. And then I realized that this is actually really what I wanted to do. And so it was a real kind of a crossover period where I was helping people with the fitness and the nutrition, and also a little bit of mindset work. And I started to help more people with the mindset work. And it kind of, I realized that I got to a point where actually this is really what I want to be doing. I want to be doing more of this stuff. And yeah, it kind of transitioned, and that's what I do now. Really, and that was kind of the journey. Yeah.
I love that you just started leaning into what you truly enjoy, but it's also, you know, if people are in the gym, maybe 3, 4, 5 hours a week total. There's many more hours, and there's so much more work to be done. And like you say, you can have such a bigger impact if you can help people in their decision making and what they're doing outside of the gym than what they're just doing in the gym. And let's be honest, from a fitness training point of view, it doesn't need to be rocket science. It doesn't need to be complex. But yeah, outside of the gym, there's so much more room for development, you know, which is really, really interesting. You mentioned, I definitely want to delve into some more of the life coaching stuff, so I find that super intriguing. But you mentioned about your own like personal development journey. Now that you've been in this world, let's say for a little while, if someone was looking to get started in their own personal development journey, is there any books or courses that you would recommend would be a good starting point?
Books or courses, starting point. Yeah. I started early on with my journey reading a couple of books that were really impactful. And there's been a few since that I'd probably also recommend. I'm not a huge reader, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
I struggle with reading physical books. I do enjoy audio books, and I find I get very different experience from doing the two. Like if I actually sit down and read a book, like I do get different things out of it, and I'll see it in a different way because I'm quite a visual learner. But but audiobooks are also great. So if you're thinking, I'm not a reader, I'm right there with you. I do try and read because actually I do get value from it. So one of the books was Unlimited Power. That is a Tony Robbins book. I really enjoyed that one. That was very early on. And I actually bought that physical copy and audiobook.
Nice.
Very easy way to get into it. Tony Robbins isn't everyone's cup of tea, and I appreciate that. If you've not heard of him before, who's one of the godfathers of coaching and personal development. He's great. I love it. I like the energy behind it. A lot of people that's off-putting for. So I would say, you know, you could go on YouTube and search him up, but his content, regardless of the delivery format, there is a lot of gold within it, in my opinion.
Oh God, yeah.
So that's one book that I really recommend. Another book that I really recommend is The Tools. Now, this was introduced to me about 2 years ago when I first joined a men's group, and it's by Phil Stutz and Barry Michaels, and it's a really great book to practically help you with moving forward in certain areas of your life. They're both psychologists, and I think psychologists, psychiatrists, and they've got some really great practical tools within that book to help you just take some steps forward. So yeah, that's another recommendation. I won't bombard people with more books, but those two, both audio or the physical format. Yeah, and if anyone's listening to this and wants to reach out to me, I've got a spare copy of The Tools, physical, and I will literally send that to someone if they want that book. So first person to message me and ask for that book, they can have it. I'll send it to them because I've got a spare copy.
I love that.
But yeah, really good.
It's always interesting for me to learn about the books that started that journey for other people. I always call it like the book that kind of turns on that light bulb. So it's just really interesting. And yeah, Tony Robbins, of course, he's the godfather in the personal development world. So you mentioned with the life coaching and that it can be really difficult to actually tell people what it is you do or to show them what you do, because it's very difficult to quantify. Ultimately, you know, where a health and fitness transformation is like, cool, they can lose 20 pounds, but also put, 20 kilograms on their deadlift. Cool. We know the numbers for that. In the life coaching, it can be really difficult to be like, oh, I'm more confident. Oh, I'm happier. I'm more content. It's very difficult to do so. So something that I've started working with some of my clients was actually getting them to have an assessment at the start of their coaching journey, which allows you to put some numbers towards how people are feeling. So similar, let's say, to like, is it the Wheel of Life, I think? Where you actually put numbers towards the start of someone's journey, and then you can reassess, which helps then to show people like, oh, I've actually helped people go from a 3 to a 7 in their confidence, help people go from a 5 to a 9 in their finances, certain things like that, which is cool. I'd love to learn more about your framework and how you approach the coaching or the individuals that you work with. So is there a client journey or a flow that your clients go through, or is it personalized every single time?
It's a good question. So within my one-to-one work, there is a format in which I help us get to know each other, because it's got to be based on a basis of trust and understanding. I always have like a quick 15-minute call with people. I like to talk. Sometimes it's more 20 minutes, 30 minutes. But yeah, sometimes after that call, if it feels like actually there's the potential for me to help them, I will then invite them to a longer call. And in that, we kind of go a little bit deeper into understanding what's going on for them right now and kind of really getting clear. And then what is it that's important to them? Like, what are the things that they would like to be different? And in some cases, that's stopping certain things that are going on in their life. And other times it's moving towards stuff that's important to them. And it's really about getting clear about where things are at right now and being clear about the reality of now, and also understanding what's within them and what their desires for the future. And just caveat with that as well, like one of the things that I think a lot of people may be unclear on when it comes to coaching is very much a future focused support. When I was going through some of my coaching training, I did a course with the Coaching Academy based in London, and the guy gave a really great breakdown of the difference between counseling, mentorship, and coaching. and how counseling is very much in a lot of instances, it's a retrospective, like rear view look at what's happened and reconciling stuff from the past, which has its place. And I think that's hugely valuable. I've done probably in total over the last 10 years, like 3 years worth of therapy, because it's been a really, really crucial in my own life, and it's helped me move forward. But a lot of it has been reconciling stuff that's happened and revisiting that and kind of healing from that. And so a big part of what I do value within people's journeys is actually, are we acknowledging stuff that might be dormant that needs to be healed? Mentoring is very much someone else has been there and they're pretty much giving you advice on how to take the next steps, which I'm not a huge fan of. Like, it has its place and it is beneficial in certain instances. However, where I guess am really keen on helping people explore coaching is that coaching, when it's done, in my opinion, in this kind of very raw format, is actually, how can we get to who you are, what's important to you, and help you move forward from where you're at right now. So it's very much forward looking. And the reason I just wanted to share that is sometimes this word coaching, and especially now in the online space, it can get thrown around a lot. And sometimes people just don't understand what it means. And I'm not saying that I have the definitive answer, but I found that really helpful when I learned that. So yeah, just a kind of a contextualizer on that one. And so, yeah, I think the coaching format, if I'm working with a one-to-one client, it's often really getting people to understand where are they at right now, and then where do they want to get to. Now, you can use tools like the Wheel of Life to help support that process. It's sort of not always necessary. Like, I'm working with someone at the moment who their primary goal when they came to me was to get a promotion, and they work for a large pharmaceutical company. They're already within a leadership role and they're wanting to move to the next leadership role. And for them, it's not so much about their proficiency in their role. Like, they've got all the skills they need. It's not a skills-based thing. It's really coming down to what's stopping them from believing they can do it, and unpacking some of that, and also giving very practical tools. And, you know, I said earlier about I help people identify what their contexts for life are.
Yeah.
One of the contexts that I'm very skillful at finding within people because of the language they use and the way that they come across is the I'm not safe context. And often that context is displayed through language, so I can pick it up through language quite quickly. But what happens is, when we don't feel safe, we start to deaden our creativity, deaden our ability to think forward and think with possibility. And we start to play very safe because we're in self-protection mode. Think about it. If you don't feel safe in your, I don't know, let's say there's a big storm going on outside, you don't feel safe, you're going to stay indoors, right? You're going to keep yourself protected. And psychologically, we do that often without realizing it. We don't feel safe because something triggers us, or within our body, we're like, I don't feel safe. So we will act psychologically in a way that keeps us in that safety box. And so often, if I can help someone identify that they don't feel safe in certain situations, which is usually what it boils back to, if that's their context, there's a few others as well that people also will experience. But if it's that one, for example, what we need to do is learn how to feel safe and confident in the times and places where we don't. And so it's kind of a subtle thing in one way, but oftentimes it runs people's lives. And it certainly ran my life for a lot of the time. These feelings of not feeling safe, and so I'd hide myself, I'd keep myself hidden, I'd pull back, and I still have tendencies of that. I'm not saying it, I'm like, yeah, I'm free of all of that. Like, it's not that. It's that actually now I can identify it and I can do something practical with it. And so when those feelings come up, I'm well equipped. I'm like, actually, I know what's going on here, and I can almost have that self-reflection moment and do something. So yeah, hopefully that helps answer the question in terms of what I do. But yeah,
it's so when you work with these high performers, do they also still get that feeling of not being safe?
For sure. And this is where it's interesting. There's a lot of people who we would call high performers, or people who are, you know, successful within their roles, their jobs. And my take on it is that everyone is a human, right? Everyone no one comes into this world with a stamp of you're going to be a successful person. Now, I'm not saying that where we're born, the place that we're born into, those don't affect us. They do. And I am very much one who believes that there is both a combination of nature and nurture, and nurture has a big part to play in who we become. So I'm not discounting that. However, when we look at high performers, we can think maybe they're separate, or maybe they're a different breed. Well, no, they're just humans, and they've had different experiences and a different journey to get to where they're at. It doesn't mean they don't have challenges with the same things. Often what happens is they just experience them in a different way. Okay. So that's my take on it. And so in answer directly to your question, do they experience that as well? Yeah, absolutely. And often some of the contexts that high performers operate from is I'm not enough.
Yeah.
That's another context that's quite prevalent within people, high performers, because we will act and we will do to be enough. But often there's a hamster wheel effect that we never quite get there because it's never enough. And yeah, so there's different contexts that people kind of bring with them as they pick them up on their journey of life. I would say that often high performers, it might be a different blend of those. But yeah, absolutely. People operate from, people get to all sorts of places in life that you're like, wow, like that's amazing. But when you really dig into story and understand their narrative on their life, you soon realize that everyone's experienced pain. Everyone's experienced things that have taken them off the path they thought they might walk. And everyone's, had experiences that have impacted them deeply. And that's I would say that is the human journey. That's what we all do. Yeah.
I love that you discussed the nature nurture, and it also then linking to that high performers and how a lot of high performers will feel that they're not worthy. And I've definitely felt that in myself before. And it's one of the reasons, like, I'm continuously pushing to be successful, because you can be operating from a place of necessity ultimately. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about that. So how would someone that doesn't feel worthy, or doesn't feel like they're potentially safe, doesn't feel that they're in a healthy place, let's say, what do they do?
It's a good question. What do they do? I mean, this is where you kind of have the steering wheel. And I'm not going to say there's a right or wrong, as I mentioned earlier, but what do you do? I mean, self-reflection is a really powerful tool. Not because I don't think the kind of navel gazing for the sake of navel gazing is actually that helpful, because you can become very insular. And actually, I think we want to contribute and we want to grow. Like deep down, I think every human wants to grow and become more of the person they know they can be. And if we only navel gaze, it can then become very insular process. So it has to be expressed, and we have to be able to express ourselves to really feel kind of that I'm living kind of feeling. So what would someone do? Well, I think for some people, journaling is really helpful. Again, I'm not a huge journaler. I've learned to do that a little bit more. And there's times when that's been really beneficial to help me process some of my emotions. Asking yourself, why do I feel this way, can be a really difficult question, but a scary one. Let's say, for example, I've got 2 kids, okay? And I know that often I can get quite frustrated or angry about things that happen. Now, that's more about me than them. But if I was to ask myself, why do I feel this way? Often that's going to reveal something within me. But that is quite a brave question to ask, because it's really like, it's like holding the mirror up and looking at yourself in the mirror. In fact, that would be another thing that you can do. So asking yourself that question, why do I feel this way, or why do I feel like this? Looking in the mirror and just looking at yourself. Sounds funny, right? We probably do it every day, but not really just stopping and looking. Some people might do this, but if you've never done this before, just looked at yourself, like looked yourself square in the mirror, that can be a really powerful tool just to look at who you are. And again, often with that, things might come up. You're like, oh, I think this, or I feel this way about myself. Asking yourself, well, why do I feel like that? I mean, these things might sound simple, but if you've ever done them, you'll know that that can be quite uncomfortable. Yeah. And that's I think the discomfort that's found within those particular questions or actions will be very revealing to yourself.
It's amazing. A good friend of mine, Callum Nelson, he runs a podcast called Naked Sunday. And the premise of the podcast and how it started was he had, a high level of insecurities and all this discomfort. And he basically went and stood in front of a mirror and stood naked, and him and his wife, and basically kind of, let's say, we'll start with that clean slate and learn to love that person that was in the mirror. And that was then, that deep reflection that come from that process that you've just mentioned. So you asked a couple of really powerful questions today. You asked, what is it that I truly want? Asked that one then, which was, why do I feel this way? I'm intrigued. Are there any other really powerful questions that you utilize within your coaching or within that journaling process?
I'll give you one more that's really useful. We talked about externalization earlier and this kind of idea of taking ownership. Often when you find yourself blaming situations, circumstances, people, it's very easy to feel disengaged with what it is that you want, and often we'll bury it. So let's say, as an example, I want to get a job in this place, for this company, let's say. You could think that, say, well, I can't do that because of, let's say, I don't know, where I live. Let's use that as an example. I can't go and work for this company because of where I live. What we've done is we've externalized the capability that we have of making that decision to apply for that job based on the fact that we live somewhere. Well, that's outside of myself. Like I can make a decision to change that, but all I've done is I've put the reason why I can't do it onto something outside of me. So one of the questions that you can ask yourself is, where am I giving my power away? And that might sound a little bit funny. What do you mean by power, Matt? Like that can feel a little bit kind of general, unspecific. Well, what is it that I'm blaming might be a better question. What or who is it that I'm blaming or using as a reason that I can't get what I want? Because what that does is, and here's the process, I use a framework within my coaching with people called AOA. It's very simple. It's awareness, ownership, and action. Okay. Now, awareness is really the starting point for a lot of people. If you can become aware of where you're externalizing, whatever it is that you're saying, I can't do this because of X, whatever X is, if you can get aware of that, then all of a sudden you have an opportunity to take ownership over it. Because now it's in my conscious thought. I'm like, oh yeah, I realize I now have been blaming the fact that I live here for why I can't go and do what I want to do, which really we'll know that that's rubbish. Like you can go and do what you want to do. You just need to make that commitment to change a few things, primarily where you live, if that is actually a genuine reason. So as soon as you become aware, you can then take ownership over that thing and say, actually, I'm no longer going to externalize and say that's the reason why not. Now I can actually be like, okay, it is scary that I might have to move and make some new friends and do whatever I need to do, but now I'm owning that. And as soon as you start to take ownership, then you can act accordingly. And so that question that I've just shared there, like, who am I blaming or what is it that I'm blaming? Again, it's a very self-revealing question, but that can, if you're feeling stuck and you feel like wheels are spinning, it's a really useful question.
It's so interesting. And I love this stuff, these deeper conversations and these challenging and confronting things, because it's different for everyone.
Yeah,
I think. And here's the thing, it's not easy for anyone either. It's not easy for anyone to answer these questions, and I think that makes it so interesting. So there'll be a lot of people now that they're instantly going to have these voices come up. They're instantly going to have these objections. I don't need to ask those questions. I don't want to go and ask that. I'm going to avoid the task altogether. Do you have any advice for someone that's ultimately, let's say, rejecting coaching, rejecting some of these voices, or rejecting the calling?
Yeah, for sure. And that is I mean, Sam, firstly, like the fact that you're kind of getting in people's minds around how this is I think is brilliant, because this is where I think conversations like this can be so valuable for people who are just, you know, jumping in. One of the things that I would say is, firstly, I acknowledge that I was in that place for so long, like resisting these kind of almost draws into looking within myself. And that's fine. Like, it's okay. There's a time when that's just not, you don't feel in that place. And like, firstly, to know that's absolutely fine. There is no pressure for you to do that at any point in your life. And often we think we need to be someone because we can compare ourselves to people on social media or people around us that we, you know, we see. It's okay to look at others and be inspired. I think that's really great. But if you're comparing yourself and pegging yourself either above or below people based on how you think you should be doing, like, that can be actually unhelpful. So firstly, if you don't feel like you're in a space where you need that support, that's cool. But if there's like a tugging, and often it's almost like a whisper, it's small, but it's just enough for you to be like, oh, there's something here that isn't sitting right. I would suggest that's probably something for you to just acknowledge and be like, oh, actually there is something here, and I think I do want to do something about this. Again, if I come back to my framework 𝗧𝗏, that's like the awareness piece, right? Now, if there's this resistance, which again, this is very prevalent when you're new to the world of maybe personal growth, because it's not normal for me to look inside of myself, oh, I feel this way about that, and I'm going to do something about it. Like, that in a lot of people's like worldview is just not normal, and that's okay. That's something that I've learned and I've found really beneficial through learning. What I would say is, if you've got that resistance, just acknowledge it first, but then also ask yourself, why do I want to resist this when life could be different? Because there's typically this tension or a tug of war between, I want something that's different in life, yet I'm holding on to what is currently my reality. And it's like, well, what's the trade-off then? You stay where you are so that you don't move towards the thing you want because it's uncomfortable. Like, if that's the trade that you're willing to have, then that's fine. But just know that you're choosing the comfort. Again, you're owning that. Like, no one else is making that choice for you. And so it's not right or wrong, but it's like, if you're resisting, like, it's your choice. Like, no one else is going to choose. It's on you to make that choice for your own life. Like, no one else is going to come and save you, in the sense that they're going to come and make your decisions for you.
Yeah.
And when you start to realize and let that sink in, I think that can be a real shift. Like, only I get to make decisions. If you want to marry that person, only you are going to be the person to go and ask them. Like, no one else is going to ask you to go and marry that person for you. Like, no one else is going to go and apply for that job for you, unless you've got someone who's in a particularly like codependent relationship. Like, you need to go and do that thing.
Yeah. It's really interesting because it's like the easy thing to do is to not listen to that voice and not listen to that calling. But ironically, that's going to cause more damage, more challenge, more pain in the future, because that voice is only going to get louder and louder over time. So I think I also look at this as well in, maybe this is quite morbid, but being like, you're not going to live forever. Yeah. You know, memento mori, right? You're going to die at some point. So if you're uncontent right now and you've got these voices coming up and there's a calling, then you're probably thinking, it's all right, I can act on that tomorrow. I can do that next month, next year. But it's like, how many instances are there where people don't get to accomplish these things because they've, you know, just put it off for tomorrow? And it's really confronting for me too, because there's ideas, there's things I want to achieve and accomplish. I'm like, oh man, am I delaying certain things for some unknown reason? Got to dig into that a little bit more. And it's a very good conversation and reminder for everyone, I think, that if there's something that's on your mind, there's some questions, there is some thoughts you're unsure on, or there's a calling, it's kind of like you've got to also ask that question of like, what am I waiting for? Like, what would make this leap possible?
And it's interesting because that like when I see this two ways. Like there's the reflection part that we've just kind of gone a little bit deeper on, like asking some really like confronting questions. There's also the go and act part.
Yeah.
And I think there's a really great balance to have both. I'm not one to just push on, just do it anyway, and never look at the stuff that is holding you, or you feel that holds you back. Because I felt a greater sense of ability to own my life through looking at those questions. But it's not like, if sometimes there is that place to just go and act, and to almost just throw yourself into it, like 2-foot jump into the thing, and just feel the fear. And sometimes that is relevant, and that is, in my experience, that's what you need to do. However, for some people, that's just not the right step, and that's also okay. Like sometimes there's certain characters within I guess the personal growth space. Someone who gets quoted a lot, and I'm not slating this guy, but David Goggins, like he's like, just push through, just do the hard thing. And yes, like sometimes that is exactly what you need to do. And I'm not taking away from that message. What I'm saying is, and not or, like, and there's also an opportunity for you to self-reflect and look inwards. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to just be one or just the other. There's a balance, I think, to have of sometimes I just need to go and act. I just need to go and do the thing. It's hard, it's scary, but I need to just go and do it. I need to stop delaying, stop thinking I need to ask myself all these questions, and just go and act.
Yeah. And
there is that.
I love that. There's actually a really good visual that I use in some of my coaching for when someone knows that they've got to do something, they've got to take action, they've got to move forward, they can't stay where they are or where they're at. Is ultimately it comes back to a plaster. Some people just need to rip that plaster off and take action and go and do that thing. Others, it's got to be this slow peel that it's gradually making progress towards, pulling that plaster off. And it is, you've got to find your own variation. Some people act better when they just take that full leap and go all in on that decision, rip the plaster off. Some people, that can put them in a way worse position because of the stress, the build-up, everything that can come with it. So some people have to take this slower approach. It's really interesting. Of like when I reflect upon my time, my stories, it's like there's been multiple occasions that I'm like, I wish I ripped that plaster off sooner or had that courage to act quicker. So now it's a case of like, okay, when I have these ideas and these things come up, that lesson is I've got to act on it sooner. I've got to take that action that you mentioned. So that's really interesting. So what are you working on at the moment? What are you progressing towards for you in the business?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a couple of things in the pipeline for my coaching business. I currently work with people one-to-one. Yeah. I've done that for the last 4 years.
Amazing.
4 years, 2022. Yeah, about 4 years. Maybe, just 3.5, 4 years. And then I'm currently working on building out a mastermind, which is going to be for leaders in business, or leaders who either run their own businesses or leaders who are within a business. Yeah. And it's going to be called the 𝗥𝗲𝗰𝗹 Mastermind. And it's going to be just a space where we coach, we share. It's going to be quite an intimate group. We're going to cap it at 10 people. And the idea is that for 12 months, we journey together and commit to growing as people together. So I'm really looking forward to launching that. And the idea is that I'm going to be launching it kind of November time for a January start. Brilliant. So there'll be a little bit of obviously Christmas and everything kind of before that. We're going to allow that to all kind of move and then move through, and then we'll start. But yeah, that's something that is in the pipeline. I ran my first event this year, which was called Finding Your Power. Really enjoyed doing that, and I'm going to be running that again next year. Awesome. And so that's going to be I think we ran that in March this year, so we'll probably be similar. March 2023 we'll run another event, and that's a live in-person event, which we did in Bedford. Found a really cool venue, and we did 10 till 4, and we just went into some of the frameworks to help people, got people to act and do stuff. So it wasn't just like getting knowledge and filling my brain with more things to think about, but it was like, okay, if I apply this to my life now, what is it I can do today? we had people taking action on the day and making some commitments to things they were going to do, which was really fun. So that's also in the pipeline. And yeah, there's I've got a few other ideas that are kind of I'm just fleshing out. Nothing that I've committed to doing yet. But yeah, for the time being, I like to keep things simple as I can, while still kind of following the nudges that are important to me. So yeah, I'm going to continue my one-to-one work. I'm going to open up this mastermind kind of 12-month program that's going to be with some leaders, and then I'll be running some live event, maybe 2 next year.
Love it, exciting stuff. I can see the level of impacts that you have as well. It's exciting, really cool to see. I've got a question for you, and I think we can add this to the list of journaling questions we've accumulated.
Yeah.
The question is, what advice would your future self give you in this current moment?
This current moment of my future self. I've done this activity a few times, but thinking about it right now, my future self, I think, would say to me right now, continue being kind and continue moving forward. And yeah, it's summarized in that kind of the being kind part is being kind to myself and also showing kindness to others. So it's both, it's in and out. And yeah, keep moving forward. Like there's always a step, there's always 1% to move forward. And I think when things are tough and challenging, it can be easy to forget that, but even just the 1% or the 1 step forward, like that's important. So yeah.
So simple, but so effective. Love it. Love it. Matt, this has been so much fun. All of your links, all the socials and everything will be down below in the video description. But where would be the best place for someone to go to connect with you and to learn a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to kind of just come and connect to me directly, you can jump onto my website, which is @daviescoaching.com. You can just send me an email there, just any of the links. I think there's a get in touch link there. If you just want to chat, say anything that resonated with you or anything like that, like that's cool. I am on Facebook and Instagram, and so those links will be below, no doubt, that you can share. So yeah, you can come and connect with me any of those places. I'm also on LinkedIn as well. So
love it. Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you for being you and just opening up, sharing. And I know that there was a few challenging questions there, but you handled it so well. And you can see, like I mentioned, the impact that you have and these much deeper conversations. And that's so impactful, so impactful. So keep that going. You're going to do some incredible things, man.
Yeah, thank you, man. It's been a real pleasure. And as we said at the beginning, like just having a chat about the things that are, current and relevant for us has been really cool. So appreciate your time.
Absolutely. We'll have to do this again, man.
Yeah.
My name is Samuel Main, and I truly hope that you've got value from today's video. If you have, please do hit like and subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow.